As Maddie said, my name is Jess. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a social work student at JMU, and I've been volunteering with Sex Ed of Virginia. Specifically, I've been working with Maddie at DHSN the past few weeks. I am also autistic. I was diagnosed later in life at 25 years old. I didn't even question whether I was neurodivergent until I was 23. But since then, some of my special interests have expanded to include disability justice and autism in general. I always had an interest in sexual and reproductive health, though now I tend to focus a lot of that interest on how these subjects are related to our attitudes about disabled sex. I am a firm believer that sexual knowledge is a human right. All that is to say, I'm just really pleased that I've been invited to speak here with you all and that this can be recorded to share with other people. Maddie, if you would please change the slide. Thank you. So a few notes before we begin. I know that you're not supposed to start a presentation with disclaimers, but I like to, in this case, I am not an expert in the field of anything. I'm an expert in myself, and I'm also someone who loves talking about issues directly affecting disabled people. I have done some research to prepare for this presentation, and I will be providing a detailed list of references to Maddie if anyone wants to follow up on parts of this. I also want to recognize that some of the things I'll be discussing in this presentation can be applicable to many people, disabled or not, autistic or not. I hope that if anything, this just shows that when we consider the issues and needs related to the disabled community, we can actually improve our approach to educating everyone about consent, since everyone can benefit from additional communication and respect for each person's autonomy. This presentation is about elevating this topic for discussion and education by people in the autistic community and largely also in the disabled community. Ultimately, I believe that we are the ones who should be driving the discussions surrounding consent as that applies to autistics. Lastly, I want to mention a brief content warning. Due to the nature of this discussion, there will be some information about sexual assault in the presentation. So I just wanted to go ahead and give a heads up on that. Maddie, if you can change the slide. So some basics about autism. Autism is a neurodivergent condition I know some of you are already familiar with. To give a quick overview, though, autism involves difficulty interpreting social cues, responding to social feedback in, sort of accepted ways, and interpreting social context. Some of us might learn how to interpret social cues, though not all of us. It is also worth noting that in times of stress or discomfort, it might be difficult for an autistic person to focus on following these social cues or rules. Tone of voice, metaphors, euphemisms, even slang might be incomprehensible to us. Again, there are autistics who can do things like use sarcasm or are great at creating metaphors, so it's important to understand this is based on the individual and the circumstances. It is important, though, to recognize that all of these skills, and they are skills, are quite challenging for some of us. For many autistics, these challenges may be compounded by sensory processing issues, and also just the fact that our entire societal structure, etiquette, and expectations are not set up for autistic people's success. This is true for most disabilities. Some autistic people may learn how to interpret social cues, but may be considered inappropriate for acknowledging or pointing out these cues when it's considered polite to ignore them. Another aspect about autism is that our affect, our outward display of emotions, tone of voice, facial expression, body language may not match the way that neurotypical people display their emotions or intent. Sometimes our faces do not match our words. Sometimes we don't display emotions in an expected way, leaving people to wonder if we are even following those social interactions happening around us. If you could change the slide, please. So I'm pleased that so many sexual health advocates and educators now emphasize consent as part of sex education. When I was in high school 12 years ago in a rural and a conservative area, this conversation around consent wasn't really a focus of my school's sex ed curriculum. Consent was only discussed insofar as to mention that drugs and alcohol could interfere with inhibitions or the ability to avoid assault. My classmates and I were told to guard our drinks at parties, and that was pretty much it. It's obvious to many of us, though, that teaching consent is about more than just addressing the possibility of somebody overpowering your physical autonomy. Consent takes into account whether a person is under duress, whether they feel safe, whether they are excited and enthusiastic, and that agreeing to some acts does not mean agreement to all, nor does it mean all future interactions are automatically consensual. Some of the ways that consent is taught focuses on a person interpreting their partner's needs, emotions, and their enthusiasm. Here is where I wanted to focus. As wonderful as it is to tell people to observe and interpret body language in social context to look for hesitation or discomfort, that leaves a lot of room for error. While it's great to encourage people to notice these things and check in, we also need to accept that you can't rely on that. You cannot necessarily rely on that all the time if you have difficulty with social context clues. Maddie, can you play that video?
How do you know for sure if someone wants to have sex with you? Well, actually, there's only one way. They need to tell you. You need to have consent. But what does consent really mean? Consent means both parties are really, truly into what's going on. This means that nobody is being guilted or pressured into doing anything. Silence does not equal consent. Some people think it's not rape unless there's fighting, screaming, or someone yelling no. But that's not true. Communication doesn't always happen with words. Body language can say a lot if you pay attention. Are they leaning in or are they pulling away? Do they look happy or do they look uncomfortable? Are they kissing you back or are they just staying kind of still? You have to pay attention to all the signals. This includes body language and words. No one can read minds, so it's always good to talk about it. Asking for consent doesn't have to be awkward. Asking for consent can actually be kind of sexy.
Want to show me your bedroom?
Show me where you want me to touch you.
Do you want to help me take these clothes off?
So, let's break this consent thing way down. 1, everyone's clear about what's about to happen next, and they're happy about it. If you're making out with someone for the first time and you want to go further, check in first.
I'm gonna take your shirt off.
Want to try something different?
2, everyone in the situation has to feel free to be able to say no without being pressured or hassled. It's not cool to pressure people into doing stuff they're obviously uncomfortable with, or make them feel bad for saying no or wanting to stop things. Being pushy or manipulative makes for some pretty bad sex. And obviously, if a person is drunk, high, passed out, or asleep, it's not okay to do sexual stuff with them. They can't consent when wasted or unconscious. So doing this is actually rape. 3, be honest about whether or not you're on birth control, have an STD, or having sex with other people. Wouldn't you want to know that? If you're going to get naked with someone, you have to have trust and honesty. 4, saying yes to sex once doesn't mean you're saying yes to it forever. It may be tough to pause in the middle of some super sweet action, but your partner has the right to stop at any time. And 5, sex is all about connections and pleasure, right? If everyone feels respected, sex will be much better for both of you. We all deserve a safe, pleasurable, and awesome sex life. The more respect you show to the other person, the more they'll trust you enough to relax and enjoy. And the more honest you are about what you want and don't want, the better things will go. It's easy to talk about what consent means, but what does it look like in real life? How are we supposed to know for sure how far someone wants to go or if they want to get intimate at all? Check out our other videos for tips on how to do this consent thing right.
Thank you, Maddie. So there is actually a lot to like about that video. I think it's a good jumping off point in so much as there are some clear guidelines and scripts that a person may use to ask for consent. There's a heavy emphasis on consent and on respecting autonomy. However, I still see some areas where this video and this type of education around consent isn't accessible for all people. Maddie, could you move to the next slide? Thank you. This video has some major gaps that I see. As an autistic, I sometimes struggle with interpreting facial expressions and body language. Some autistics, again, may learn how to read faces and bodies very well, or may at least understand and interpret nonverbal communication from those that they're close with or familiar with. It's also true that some may have difficulty doing that when they're in a new and an unfamiliar situation. Again, the effect of stress might mean that your attention is diverted from that. Some autistics have difficulty processing auditory stimuli while interpreting social cues. I've actually had some friends explain that if they are looking at a person, they cannot understand what words are being said. The issue is that this runs counter to how neurotypicals are taught to interpret nonverbal indications of interest and attention. Some of us might have had experience with that. The expectation is that if you are paying attention, you are looking at someone's face, possibly even in their eyes, you are nodding perhaps, you might have an open face, whatever that means, I still can't tell you. This demonstrates another potential area of concern for autistics, which is that our body language might be a different dialect than neurotypicals are accustomed to. The problems that can arise from this mean that allistics may, based on a smile or open body language, assume their partner is excited and comfortable when that simply isn't true. Or it can mean that autistics who have been taught to look for specific body language might overlook discomfort if it doesn't match up to their understanding of what discomfort looks like. For example, one facial expression that can mean many things is a smile. People smile when they're happy, excited, content, pleased, and welcoming. People also smile when they are nervous, scared, annoyed. That's because to autistics, some of us, a smile might just be the mouth is curving up, sometimes showing teeth. You could show some people a photo of someone smiling from being happy and another grimacing in discomfort while trying to look polite, and it would seem like the same emotion is being expressed. If autistics are taught a smile means happiness, we're likely to believe just that, unless we've been able to learn these subtle differences. Another issue that arises from these teachings is that language needs to be precise. When one partner asks a question such as, "Want to see my bedroom?" "Want to try something different?" or some variation of that, it leaves a lot of room for misinterpretation. If I, and I think many others, heard someone say, "Want to see my bedroom?" I would assume that person wanted to show me their bedroom. Maybe they have some cool books or posters I need to see. Maybe they have some Funko Pops I haven't seen. I would not see that as a clear indication of interest in sex. This is confusing and it's a question that needs translation. Anytime something is being translated, we know that there's room for error. It always introduces the possibility that you might accidentally alter the original speaker's intention from its original format. This translation from a euphemism is supposed to indicate that the partner in this video is interested in sex, but it's an indirect and it's a confusing question. And that's a problem. So before Maddie changes the slide, I do want to give a heads up, but this portion of the presentation will be discussing sexual assault prevalence, risk factors, and issues surrounding that. Maddie, if you could change the slide. Okay. Autistics, like all disabled people, are more likely to be a survivor of sexual assault than they are to be a perpetrator. The risk for this is also impacted by the intersection of identities that an autistic might experience. For example, Autistic women and non-binary folks are more likely to experience unwanted sexual contact. There are some factors that are believed to contribute to these risk factors for autistics experiencing sexual assault. For instance, autistics do not always pick up on a collection of signals that someone may dislike them or wish them harm. They also might not be assertive or self-advocate when communicating boundaries to others. Autistics are often invalidated about our feelings regarding our bodily autonomy or needs. This is true that this is probably worse in childhood, but for some autistics, they grow up in highly authoritarian environments, meaning that self-advocacy is not only discouraged, it might even be unsafe. One example, it can be a struggle to figure out what a reasonable boundary is to ask of other people. For example, I have sensory issues with certain smells. It is not, however, generally considered acceptable for me to ask my classmates not to wear perfume or cologne to school because I might be in a classroom with them and it will cause me sensory distress. With the amount of weight and consideration autistics have to give to what boundaries we can realistically request, it can make it confusing to figure out if your requests are valid. The way the intricacies of social rules and context are glossed over or poorly explained can also contribute to confusion around consent. Going back to the video we watched, it is easy to see how an autistic might misinterpret whether agreeing to go to the bedroom of someone you are dating means agreeing to sex. It's not clearly stated what the person in that video wants to do. Someone who is unaware of the social cues happening might believe that a yes to that question means you have obtained consent and should continue. Another person might be taken aback to discover their partner believed an innocuous question was leading to sex. In the case of consent, we never want a gray area where boundaries are unclear. Maddie, would you change the slide, please? It is also true that just like the general population, autistics are capable of transgressing boundaries up to and including sexual assault. Some ways that autistics are transgressing boundaries might seem innocuous to them. Autistics have sometimes engaged in stalking people when interested in friendship or intimacy. That is self-reported from some folks. One autistic man described how he met a woman he was interested in, talked with her at a party. He got her number and tried to text or call her with no answer. From them, he decided to show up at a bar he knew she liked to go to. That is stalking, and it is absolutely inappropriate, but it is also something that at the time seemed logical and harmless to this man when he was doing it. Why wouldn't he just show up? If she wasn't answering her phone, maybe something happened to it, and he should just try to meet her in person. The kind of rationalization that can happen when we don't have clear understanding of the intention behind communication leaves this whole area, again, that is gray, where I or other autistics might not understand that a person is uninterested in their friendship or anything else. And the person who is trying to make it clear that they're not interested in that feels uncomfortable or unsafe or even harmed. Some recommendations for explaining these boundaries come with rules. This is helpful in some cases. A lot of autistics can rely on social rules to guide them. It is helpful also for autistics to have scripts. All of that might be part of a solution, but there's an issue that arises when these rules are unclear or if they contradict other social expectations we have. Maddie, would you change the slide, please? I want to share a story now about my husband and his dating history. I'm on the asexual spectrum and I don't have a lot of dating experience to draw from for examples, but since he gave me permission, I'm going to use his for this presentation because I like to mine my husband for content with his permission. My husband is also autistic and he was diagnosed at a pretty young age. He had parents who were sex educators and they focused on teaching their children to check in for consent before crossing any boundaries. However, his parents are also knowledgeable and understanding about autism, and his father is autistic. So they went even further and really carefully discussed any social situation that came up where Nathan had questions or he did something that was crossing a social boundary. That came in handy. It made him a respectful person. And when he was in high school, he was dating a person who did not internalize that same messaging about consent being an ongoing and clear process. This became clear to him pretty early on. Whenever he would ask the girl he was dating, "Can I kiss you?" she told him he was ruining the moment. I know that that is not a new sentiment that people have expressed. You saw in the other video that often asking for consent is still considered new enough that people feel like it's taking you out of the moment or interfering with sexual pleasure. She told my husband, who was not my husband at the time, that she wanted their first kiss together to be romantic and spontaneous. She assured him he would know when the time was right. He assured her that no, he would not. So he never did kiss her and they stopped dating. I do understand where his crush got the impression that a partner should know that a kiss or any other contact is imminent and welcome. We see this play out over and over again in movies, books, TV shows, other media. It is something that's so ubiquitous that we might not even question it or notice it. There are cues from the movie itself telling us the sweeping music, the focus on the lips from the camera. As they get closer and closer, there's a lot of acting that is happening that tells us, oh, the kiss is happening and it's wanted. That doesn't reflect real life. I have a clip here from a very popular movie, or at least it was at the time it came out, from 18 years ago, which is kind of a long time, but I think it's worth watching because a lot of people still idealize this movie and some situations that are similar to this. It was considered a very romantic movie for a long time, and then in more recent years it has garnered a lot of discussion about, among other things, the way that protagonists ignore consent. If you have already seen this movie and you don't like this, I'm so sorry, but I think it's worth looking at. Maddie, would you please play the video?
You want to dance with me?
No,
Why not?
because I don't want to.
Noah? She's with us. Hey, Alec, you want to ride the Ferris wheel?
I'd love to.
All right. Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Noah Calhoun. What? Works down from Lumberyard with Finn.
Did you say he was standing like 2 inches away from my face?
Yeah, I saw. That's Noah, though. You know, I'm surprised he even came over. I think he likes you.
Hey! What are you doing?
You can't do that! I'll tell you when I get down, Tommy.
I'm Noah Calhoun.
So?
So it's really nice to meet you. Who is this guy?
I don't know. No Calhoun.
I would really like to take you out.
Friend, do you mind? You can't sit more than 2 people in a chair, Noah!
Okay, Tommy, all right.
Get down, Noah! You're gonna kill yourself!
Noah, cut it out!
Well, will you go out with me?
What? No.
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 Hey, pal, she just told you.
Why not?
I don't know, because I don't want to.
All right, well, you leave me no other choice then. Oh, my God.
I'm not kidding, Noah! Stop fooling around!
What are you doing? Noah, grab the ball.
I'm gonna ask you one more time. Will you? Or will you not go out with me? God damn, my hand's slipping.
Then grab the car, you idiot!
Not until she agrees.
Go out with him, honey.
Okay, fine. I'll go out with you.
No, don't do me any favors.
No, I want to.
You want it.
Yes!
You want it. Say it.
I want to go out with you.
Say it again.
I want to go out with you!
All right, we'll go out.
You think you're so smart, don't you? That wasn't funny, no, you idiot! Oh, it's okay. I'll take care of this.
What are you doing? Please don't do that. Just don't do that part either. I can't believe it. Oh, God.
You're not so cocky now, are you?
I'm gonna get you for that.
Oh, maybe you will, then.
Thanks, Maddie. So, that's a pretty cringeworthy clip. I won't say that the rest of the movie gets better if you do watch it. It has a cultural relevance, but there are a lot of issues with how consent is portrayed. And I do think that that still has some relevance. I know people who have talked about how they were asked out by someone and they didn't want to date that person, but the other person was persistent, and they were told by people around them that's flattering. It's pervasive and it's still there. And I think when you compound the issue that you might not understand when enough is enough, you might not have a social awareness that is instinctive to you, where you can see the other person is not playing or having fun. Some of you, like I said, may have seen that movie before, and some may be really surprised it was popular. The early aughts were a strange time, I think, in depiction of romance and relationships. But what may have been very obvious is that Noah does not listen to Allie's boundary when she says no to a date. He continues to harass her until he wears her down. He coerces her. That's a situation where she is under duress because he's threatening to fall from a great height and injure himself, and Allie agrees, and he even pushes her further into pretty much begging him to go out with her. And it's really, really gross. And it's also gross that she, probably feeling threatened, removes his clothing despite him begging her not to. The point of this clip is to show how sometimes the examples of relationships we see give a terrible example of how to ask for consent. I understand there is a value in entertainment, that even this type of entertainment, it does not excuse crossing these boundaries. That is not what I'm saying. But for some people who have difficulty seeing nuances in real life that are supposed to teach us what is socially appropriate, movies and other media are helpful for modeling behavior. I've known many autistics, myself included, who perhaps because they were trying to mask or just follow social rules masking, by the way, is when a person hides their disability, often by maybe for an autistic, by following the social rules, pretending that this is their preferred way of communicating, things like that. And we did that by following a character on screen in order to learn facial expressions or tone of voice or body language. Some of us learned by watching or reading this. Again, that doesn't excuse when people transgress boundaries, but it can provide a context as to how it can be challenging and confusing when you're suddenly told that real life isn't like that. It isn't surprising then that part of the ways we have to teach people about consent, just like how you teach autistic people, involves unlearning harmful things that they've internalized. Maddie, could you change the slide? So to that end, I think one of the most powerful tools to teach consent in an accessible way is to have the thoughts and ideas of the autistic community and the greater disability community, because sometimes there are overlaps in these, challenges or incorrect consent teachings represented and expressed. I think this is an ongoing discussion that needs to be led by us because we are experiencing harm from this lack of education. Autistic people are experiencing sexual assault, and autistic people are sometimes perpetrating it. They are also sometimes completely surprised to find out that what they have done is wrong and harmful. And I think that ignorance needs to end. Now, I would really love it if you all would join in and talk, because I said this needs to be a discussion, a collaborative effort. And I've put some suggestions, some questions, but please, any thoughts that you have, feel free to chime in now and let me know what you're thinking.